I kind of got into film through picking up a camcorder back in the day. My dad had one, and he was pretty unwilling to let me pick it up at first because it's expensive technology or something. And he had it for home videos, and I was like, "Oh, this thing's pretty cool." And I started making little stories with it, and through iMovie discovered the magic of editing, and I was like, "Oh, I can like put different things together with music," and really enjoyed making little stories that way. And through middle school, through high school, at a certain point, I had some friends who got into skateboarding and rollerblading, and they were much better at it than I was. So I just filmed them and made a couple of skate videos, and was like, "Oh, this is really cool." And that kind of made sense to me, along with making and building things. I always had a kind of a passion for tangible objects and putting things together. So still photography and videography at that time were all kind of things I was interested in. I realized I didn't want to have a job in a traditional sense. I just wanted to make something somehow and have that be a career, without really being too conscious about like what a career is. But then I kind of tested out a few of these things. I did a lot of woodworking, and I was also a tap dancer for a little bit, and thought, oh, maybe I could have a career in one of these things. But I went to like a summer high school film program thing, like a summer camp for filmmaking. And it was a 1 month intensive, like 24/7, all you're thinking about is making movies. And I was like, oh, this is the thing. I fell in love with it. And I look back, and there are a few things that I remember that really stuck for me. One was free food. I really like the idea of craft services and catering. And the other thing is I realized it was the only thing that got me both mentally and physically exhausted by the end of the day. Had a lot of energy growing up. I still have a lot of energy, and wanted to find something that would make me feel like complete by the end of the day, having worked on something. And some of the things that I played around with were, physically exhausting or mentally taxing, but not both at the same time. And I found filmmaking to really satisfy both of those things. So did that, and was like, oh, I'm going to be a director, because that's kind of all you think there is in the world when you start making movies. And went to film school, and that's where I met you. And we, came to New York, and was like, oh, I really want to get out of the suburbs and do something. I don't know. There's something exciting about the energy in a city as well. So came to New York, and tried directing things, and kind of quickly realized that the projects that I directed didn't look very good and had pretty bad stories, and the projects that I shot that my friends directed looked good and had much more interesting stories. So I was like, maybe I should fill this role and let other people come up with the ideas. But as I started to see myself in that role, I really enjoyed it and was satisfied by the visual storytelling and the making of things, and being on set and collaborating, and short-term problem solving and long-term problem solving. And it just kind of scratched all the itches. So I found myself better served by servicing somebody else's vision. And then, I don't know, worked on a lot of crews for a long time, and just like, this is the thing, set my goal, and kept working at it. Shot a lot of little projects here and there. And then at the end of 2014, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like fully be a DP and not anything else. So I quit camera assisting and quit doing G&E work, and lost a lot of money and lost a lot of jobs. But in 2015, I shot 2 features, and one of them did really well. That one. Shot both of those movies in that 1 year. Yeah, the rest is kind of history, I guess. And I don't know, it's just been growing since then. But really, your first question, just like, how do I feel about where I am in my life? Like, finally kind of settling into like a certain amount of confidence, and this is what I was meant to do, and I'm gonna keep doing this and keep growing in this way. And it's just about finding new projects and things that keep it fresh. So
How did you feel during that time period where you were figuring out how to be what you wanted to be full time?
I didn't feel the sort of unease around having uncertainty around that a lot of people do, that come to that in their mid and late 20s, like trying to figure out, what is my life, what am I doing? Kind of settled on that early enough. And I remember my dad said something like, by choosing a path, it feels like you're closing off your options, but in many ways you're really opening more options by committing to something. You can't, go deeper down any particular path unless you've said, this is my path. And then suddenly there's 5 more doors to open, even though you're closing a few doors behind you. So taking that step and saying, this is the thing, that I've always kind of made those choices very carefully, but decidedly. And once I've committed to something, I stick with it. And that's been very helpful to keep that in the back of my head. So it feels good to do that, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very empowering way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
How did it feel when you're making that kind of commitment? Did you ever second guess yourself?
No.
Yeah, it seems like you're very certain.
Yeah.
It's like I guess you listen to your intuition or what you enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
would you say?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's intuition, because I'm very cerebral. I don't listen to this as much as I listen to this, for lack of a better metaphor, but I will analyze what are the pros and cons of making a particular choice. But once I've made the choice, I think decision regret is kind of a pitfall that I've avoided, and try to just go with it, I guess, because there's more opportunities to come. And also kind of be willing to change directions if I need to. I feel like there's a security in knowing that if after a certain number of years this doesn't work out, well, at least I tried it, and I tried it to the fullest, and I didn't compromise on that. And I feel like I look at some people and see a hesitancy to commit because they're worried they can't then make a left turn later. I just see, I could totally make a left turn later. That's totally fine. And I'll still have had the experience I've had, and that will still be useful. And it's just, I'm only losing time by not committing, as opposed to losing time by waiting and seeing.
Mm-hmm. You're constantly missing out on things that you could have done by kind of waiting and deliberating for too long.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
So I feel like what you do is so collaborative. Mm-hmm. What makes for a good collaboration?
I think for me as a cinematographer, that collaborate with many people in different ways. And I think the main collaboration is with the director. And that to me is best when they have a clear vision of what they want, but are also sort of treating me like we talk about treating actors. I think that if you start to give line readings or really result directing, it prevents me from doing my best work and bringing my own interpretation and ideas to the table. But if you if you can see this is what works and what doesn't in the context of the whole film, then I can bring all these ideas and you can say, not that, but that one, that's good. And that, to me, brings out the best work in me, and also is the most pleasurable to work with somebody when they have that approach. But I think a huge part of it is also just a positive attitude, having a sort of, there's in some ways going to film or shooting a film is like going to war. Not in a lot of ways, but in some ways it is. And there's a bit of trauma and intensity that comes with that, and it's a high stress environment, and everything has to be done very short term, and fast decisions have to be made. So a good collaboration for me is one that I can walk away from what would otherwise be a traumatizing experience because of the nature of the job, and feel like, well, that was really fun. And it's because the person that I was working with had a positive attitude and approached every setup with okay, cool. How can we make this better? How can we all get behind this and to sort of lead with love instead of fear? And those I see as the two different modes of leading. And then in terms of my collaboration with the crew, I think of that as my own leadership, and leading with love is really important to me, and making sure that everybody feels like they're having a good time and contributing positively to the project, and that even if I'm having a bad time, trying to not let that show, because it's setting the tone. The director and the DP and some of the other people above the lines tend to set a tone that everybody picks up on really easily.
How do you set that positive tone? What kind of ways do you help do that?
Specifically, I set up sort of structures for myself to follow. So a huge part of it is pre-production and planning and making that information accessible to everybody. I think that when I've been a crew member and seen that the leaders are not prepared, don't have a clear plan, or if they do, they're not communicating it, that hurts me as a crew member. I can't do my job to the best of my ability. So I want to make sure that I'm coming in with a very clear plan, and I will shot list and photo board, shoot photos as storyboards for the whole movie, and make all of that information accessible to every crew member who's interested. And I find that even just the idea of that being available, whether or not people look at it, is inspiring, and people feel a certain confidence in that, and then I come in with my own confidence because I have a plan. As we go through the process, it's very satisfying to get a shot that works really well, and to express that out loud and let people know with gratitude that their specific work on a particular shot was really valuable and made it possible. I know people love that, and I love that, and I like hearing that, and I like being able to express that. So that's another way of expressing that positive attitude and just kind of keeping a momentum. So, yeah.
I feel like it's an interesting point to think about the physical and the mental together, because like you were saying earlier, it's it's physically demanding and mentally demanding.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about when you're working with equipment versus in a more mentally taxing environment? I guess I'm trying to get at those different mindsets,
right?
If they are different.
Yeah, I think they can be different, but it's best when they're engaged at the same time. I think specifically as a camera operator, there's a lot of thought going into framing as it's happening, and but it requires entire focus of your body to control every muscle and make sure that the camera's moving exactly how it's supposed to move. And I think if you are, working in grip and electric, for example, or let's say you're laying dolly track, I think there's a certain amount of forethought that needs to go into, okay, how am I going to get the camera where it needs to go? And then there's the physical element of just heavy objects that need to get moved, and the sort of satisfying physicality of leveling track. But that requires thinking ahead and planning and procedure, and communicating also, making sure that it's, whatever other people want to happen is happening. So if you're just carrying the gear, and maybe more so with lighting, actually, if you're just bringing a flag, if I've said, okay, well, we're gonna flag the light here. If you're just bringing the flag, then you're not engaging your brain, or the mental aspect of your brain is engaged, you're alive, right? But you're not engaging mentally with the task, and it's just, okay, here's a C-stand, here's a sandbag, here's the flag. And at some point, if you're experienced, it becomes muscle memory. But are you looking at the light? Are you looking at the monitor or the frame? And even if you can't, are you asking about what's the effect, the desired effect of this flag, and why is it the desired effect? If you're asking those questions and thinking that way, then you're going to be much faster at putting that flag in the right place. And it'll be appreciated a lot more by everybody, if you can be sort of predicting and thinking ahead that way. So I think if I can set the tone from the beginning of the day that our minds are working and our bodies are working at the same time, then everybody can be kind of executing in a way that is predictive and intelligent, instead of just the physicality of moving objects, right? Because I could hire anybody off the street to move objects. That's not why I hire a good crew. A good crew is one who's and not just experienced either. It's one who's like thinking ahead and understanding the goal of every object that is placed and placing it intelligently.
How do you deal with setbacks or difficult situations? Because they always arise, I feel like, on film sets.
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on the type of difficult situation, right? Usually I try to just take it in stride and just be like, okay, that's happening. Now we're gonna continue moving all the parts that need to continue moving, and that will be dealt with in its due course. It's best to count to 10 and have everybody count to 10. So I'll be like, okay, all the grips and electrics, let's just get together. Let's pause for a second. Let's count to 10. Bring everybody over by the camera. We can look at the monitor and be like, okay, here's what we're trying to do. We've tried like these 6 things. They haven't worked. Like, let's try to problem solve this. Because if we just kind of keep like, okay, do this. Okay, no, it's not working. Push this way, whatever. It's like, it's just gonna take so much longer. And time is of the essence always. But if it's like that kind of thing, a physical problem, I guess it's good to take a step back. If it's like, okay, we've got a problem that is out of our control, like we were thinking about shooting in this area and now we've been told we can't be in this location or this part of this location, we can't put a light somewhere. Okay, well, let's take a step back and see, well, how can we solve that in a very different way? How can we, can the story of the film be, can we even take a bigger step back and look to the writer director and say, hey, like, I know we really wanted to get this scene here, but like, what if this happens instead? And I think the worst thing you can do is just be like, oh, the film's ruined, because then the film will be ruined.
Yeah, sometimes to me, like when you're describing that, I kind of visualize when I used to work more on narrative films, it's like a train like on a track, you can't stop it, and it's like falling apart at the same time.
Yeah.
And like obstacles are flying in and stuff, but like you just have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Just like accept it and move on.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, this actor's not going to show up today. Like, okay, well, I guess we'll shoot something else in the meantime, and that'll be fine.
Yeah, it's cool the way you look at technology too, because it seems like it's all a lot of problem solving, like how can we repurpose or like make the most use of this. Like I remember hearing you say something about like the camera body is not that big a deal. For a lot of people it's like the camera is so important, but for you it's just like a means to an end. You know what I mean? I think that's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. A camera is a camera is a camera is probably what I said to you. And I think that's very true. And it's like, really it's about who the people are behind the lens and what you're putting in front of the lens more than the lens and the image sensor. But you can choose a camera that's right for a project. And that's part of the reason I don't like to own equipment. I really see each project as having its own needs and what's right budgetarily and what's right functionally and what's gonna make the right image for this film. I'll kind of weigh in on that.
What would you say to someone who's trying to make a film and is kind of just starting out or just trying to figure it out? How much does equipment matter? Should you just go for it, or should you wait for a budget? How do you feel about those type of questions?
Right. I think just go for it. I think that's better because you're gonna learn a lot, and your first film is not gonna be good. And it's like, just accept making a bad movie because then you know how to make a movie and you see what's bad about it and you know how you want to make it better. And I feel like maybe the best advice is to really do the pre-production. Don't skimp on that at all. It's free to do it, especially if you're directing or it's like your project. So there's no reason that you can't prepare infinitely for something. Because you want to show up on set, know what you're doing, have confidence in that, and so that you can improvise, because inevitably there will be something that isn't part of the plan that will show up. But if you've done all of the prep and you've done all of the planning and thought of as much as you possibly can think of, then when something unexpected comes, you'll either have a plan B, so you'll know what to do when that happens, or you'll be able to throw out the plan, but keep the intention behind the plan. If you don't have the experience, that's fine. You can try to think of all the things, and then you'll try it once and see all the things you didn't think of, and then you'll know, okay, I have to next time think more of things. So,
What are you excited about coming up for you?
more interesting projects. I don't know. I interviewed for a couple things yesterday, and we'll see if any of them click into place. So, yeah. I think just growing to larger budget scales, larger films, but also more interesting stories and stories that I haven't seen before, movies that I want to see, and either working with new people who are awesome or working with the same people who are awesome and growing together with them. I think there's such a cool loyalty that you can develop with a crew, and if you can bring people who you've worked with before, you get a shorthand and can grow up together and know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And like I just love the collaboration so much that and it's not a solo art form. So for me to like enter a space with a whole bunch of new people is scary and daunting. And I've learned to be able to do it, but it'd be great to just bring the friends along and keep working with friends. Cause I think there's like, and I don't think this exists in a lot of other workplaces where people who work together tend to also be friends outside of work in film. And my partner was surprised to see that like all of my friends I work with or have worked with one way or another. So
yeah, I feel like restaurants are the only other place that I've worked in where it's that level of intensity.
Yeah.
Like I think back, like when I think back to being on film sets, I think of like being in the van at 3 a.m., you know, like driving the truck, like someone's crying, you know what I mean? Like someone had a breakdown.
Yep.
It's so intense.
Yeah. Yeah. It is like going to war in some ways like that. Right. And I've heard restaurants are like that. And I think it's because the hours are intense, but also the like tight spaces and physical efficiency that's required and teamwork that's required in a restaurant. I also think sports are pretty similar, playing in a team sport. And I think often of myself as the coach of the team when it comes to camera and grip and electric. If I can, you know, huddle everybody together, make a play, and then everybody's going to run the play, we're going to do a really good job. So, and try to, you know, do little pep talks like a coach would, and the stretches, you know, it's obviously a part of it. But yeah, but those environments are not art specifically, right? There's creativity involved in sports and restaurant work as well, but you're not like making somebody's vision, I guess, or I don't know, maybe you are, who knows?
Yeah, I guess you could say it maybe with a chef, but it's much more temporary.
Yeah.
You know, it's not an artifact that you're creating, this final product that it all, you know, comes out to. It's kind of like each day is its own product.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I've thought about that sometimes too with film. It's like there's evidence of what you've done, but it's like no one knows what all that went into it behind the scenes.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, which is the magic of making movies, right? And trying to hide all that is you know, a fun little problem to solve as well.
How do you feel about comfort as like a concept? Because I feel like you have to kind of sacrifice a lot of comfort, you know, day to day, and also just out of your comfort zone. Like you're going to different places every day, you're doing physically taxing things. You're kind of just always putting yourself in a state of discomfort. How do you feel about that?
I don't think of it as a state of discomfort. I think that, yeah, those are, doing new things is not outside of my comfort zone. I think that that's the fun of it, and I love that. Going to a new place every day, and you know, I experience more discomfort being in stasis. But the idea of going outside my comfort zone doesn't really ring true to me, because I like those new experiences. Novelty is exciting for me. Yeah, and I feel like whenever I have to sit here for, you know, too many days in a row, I'm like, I get really antsy, and that's discomfort. Yeah.
It's funny. It must just be our personalities, because I think
the opposite for you.
I'm like working from home for the past 2 years. I'm like, this is great. I can do whatever I want. You know, like you can kind of do my little hobbies here and there when I want. But I think maybe it's just a personality thing. You know, like I like solo stuff. You like group things. Maybe that's, I don't know, just something just fundamentally about us.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think that there's sort of two spectrums that are intersecting that I see people on. That is outgoing and shy versus introverted and extroverted. And I think of outgoing and shy to be how you present to new people, and introverted and extroverted is where you get your energy. And I think of myself as a shy extrovert. I really like being around people, but preferably people I know. Whereas some people are, outgoing introverts, where you first meet them, they're super friendly and really, easy to get along with, and maybe you're fast friends, but they prefer their alone time and really recoup and gain energy from being alone. I find that really draining. But you can also be, outgoing extrovert and a shy introvert as well. But
did you have any other pieces of wisdom that came to mind that you wanted to share?
Well, I think because we've talked a lot about the process of filmmaking specifically. I think your series and your audience is interested in creativity, right? That's sort of the focus here. Am I right?
That's what I've been steering towards.
Yeah, I think my feelings about creativity specifically are that you can't force it, but you can set up the circumstances for yourself to find creative spark. And I think there's maybe two different kinds of creativity. One is in a vacuum coming up with an idea, like from nothing, or filling a blank page or something like that. That's one type of creation and creativity, and the other is maybe creative problem solving. And I'm very strong at the latter and very weak at the former. And I think that the former really requires you to set aside time, and just, again, you can't force it. It just happens when it happens, and you never know what's going to create a spark of an idea. Whereas creative problem solving, it by its nature needs to happen fast. And I think that maybe that's a skill that can be developed as opposed to an innate thing somehow, where you can more easily creatively solve a problem by having had the experience of solving similar problems. Like, oh, I've seen how this type of thing works or doesn't work, and now I know how to apply a similar thing. But repurposing, I think you put that well as a way I think about technology, saying, the creative aspect of it is applying something that's in a box outside of that box, and putting two things that wouldn't otherwise go together to solve the problem. So
yeah, that seems like where your like real strength is.
Yeah, that's what I enjoy. For sure.